Well, for many of us back in the old days, this was the highlight of video game basketball. Double Dribble on the NES was a fantastic game. Sure, there were some strange things about how the game was presented, but there's something really satisfying about playing this game. Well, it's a game that becomes better with time. When I first played it, I was concerned about the controls and some of the more bizarre aspects of the game. But you know, the more that I play it, the more that I like it. In fact, this might very well be the best basketball game on the NES, and the franchise really came a long way. The roots of Double Dribble go back to this old Konami arcade game, Super Basketball or Super Basketball. Exciting shooto is what it says up there at the top, exciting shot. Interestingly enough, this game had you enter your initials, a preview of what was to come. I wonder if that old cheerleader code will still work. Anyway, with no warning, you're thrown right into the thick of it. The goal is to move the ball down the court and score a basket. Your team starts off down by a certain number of points, 8 in this case. You're supposed to score enough points in 1 minute to beat the computer. Now, if the computer gets the rebound or touches the ball, the game says block shot and has you start all over again. There's a button for dribbling, which is the best way to get the ball down the court. However, your players simply can't hit a shot from close range. You'll also be called for fouls, seemingly at random. With the frustrating play control, it's actually exciting when you finally get something good to happen. And sometimes you'll get a foul called in your favor, which leads to free throws. Now, I really don't understand why people want to put free throw shooting into basketball arcade games, but here we are. Anyway, the voice synthesis is cool, but the game is pretty bad. I mean, it's impressive for 1984, don't get me wrong. It was certainly ambitious to make a 5-on-5 basketball game in 1984, but this game is honestly borderline unplayable. The arcade flyer looked awesome, but it couldn't cover up the awful gameplay. And according to arcademuseum.com, it seems that this game is pretty rare and has little demand. I think that these ratings say it all, though I'm surprised to see that it got a 5 for gameplay. I would give it a 0. Seriously, other than the historical significance of this game, there's really no reason to play it. Now, you would think that Konami would have given up on basketball games after that stinker, but no, they were back at it 2 years later with Double Dribble. And Double Dribble in the arcades was surprisingly similar to Super Basketball. Double Dribble also has you input your initials. It's an interesting trend. And then you get the national anthem. I have no idea why they programmed that into the US version. It's an embarrassment. Anyway, the game itself really isn't quite that bad. When I first played this, I had no idea what I was doing, and it shows. Sometimes passing like this works, but you really want to dribble. So, like NBA Jam, there were 3 buttons, but one of the buttons is to dribble. You're supposed to push the dribble button over and over again to let your guy run down the court with the ball. Now, the same button doubles as the steal button, which means that you're basically spamming the same button over and over and over again in this game. Passing in this game is extremely risky, and that's a problem because you'll often find that you've got the ball without realizing it. There are tons of strange things that happen in this game, like the computer dropping the ball for no reason. Really, the best strategy is to drive the ball up the court with whatever guy you have and get a slam dunk. Now, I wasn't able to get the famous corner 3-point glitch to work on the arcade version, though I certainly tried. You'll also notice that the ball goes out of bounds way too often. I don't understand what happened here. I guess my player was standing out of bounds when I passed it to him. You'll also notice that the computer almost always misses slam dunks. I'm not sure why. Meanwhile, it's easy to accidentally shoot a full court 3-pointer because you're trying to block the shot. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that the scores are really out of whack. Even as a total beginner to this game, I was able to get over 40 points in the first quarter. This game is also a quarter hog. A single coin gets you only 1 minute of game time. If you're leading when your time expires, the game gives you an extra minute of game time for free, which is nice. But the game also gets progressively harder the more you play. Well, I seriously can't imagine trying to get through a full game of this. It would take you forever. Well, I played for about 25 minutes and didn't even get halfway through the second quarter. Honestly, there just isn't enough gameplay variety here to make it interesting enough to keep going. But you know, it certainly is better than Super Basketball was. Now, my biggest complaint is that stupid computerized voice, which is just annoying. The game would have been playable if the quarters had been something like 3 minutes long instead of 12. And of course, that's the game that inspired the NES Classic. Double Dribble on the NES is a lot better than the arcade game. For one thing, there's no need to push a button to dribble, the players just dribble. It's also a lot easier to see where the ball is and to get the rebound. They also got rid of that awful robotic voice, which is a major improvement. Now, it does have its quirks, many of which are well known. But even with the corner 3 glitch, this game really is good. And I guess that we can thank Family Guy for the fact that everybody knows about that glitch. Now, what you might not know is that the Japanese version of Double Dribble only came out on the Famicom Disk System and was actually really different. The FDS version was called Exciting Basketto, as you can see in the original box art. It came on a single double-sided disc. And if you're a collector, you can find copies for pretty cheap, even if you include shipping. Of course, the biggest problem with the Famicom Disk System is that you had to wait for the disc to load, something that was never an issue with the ROM cartridges. And the other issue is that you had to turn the disc over to get to the side B for the system. Gamers put up with a lot back in those days. In fact, I think that we underestimate just how patient gamers were in the 1980s. Anyway, once the minute or so of loading is over, you get to the game. It's the same as the NES game, though I think it's a little bit faster. I wasn't able to get the corner 3 trick to work at all, not even once. You'll also notice that the flickering is not quite as bad as it is in the NES version. And then there's the great soundtrack. Now, one of the problems that you'll notice is that the cutscenes are gone. The slam dunk cutscenes were one of the most iconic part of the arcade game, even if it didn't always match the action on the court. They're also part of the NES version, though all the players are in silver and don't have the right uniform colors. But there are no dunk animations in Exciting Basket, and it really is a shame. Now, one problem that both the FDS and NES versions have is that it's way too easy to steal the ball. The computer, meanwhile, does absolutely nothing on defense. Now, there is a glitch on the FDS version that allows you to steal the ball and score slam dunks without even trying, and you could probably play like this the whole way if you really wanted to. Overall, though, this is really a solid game. The NES version is a lot more true to the arcade, however. Now, there are a few surprises and Easter eggs here and there that you might not know about. For example, if you somehow got to the end of the first quarter in the arcade version, you'll get this mini game that helps you get extra game time. They call it the challenging stage, and it's basically just a 3-point shooting drill. Every shot you make gives you an extra second of playtime. Well, it's kind of a disappointment if you ask me. Only a second for making a shot. Meanwhile, you're putting in a quarter for every single minute of gameplay. I really prefer the 8-bit versions with the cheerleader halftime show. In fact, I think that this is one of the best halftime shows in any 8-bit sports game. But at least the arcade version knows which team gets the ball out of bounds at the start of each quarter. Both the FDS and NES versions give you another jump ball at the beginning of each new period. Now, the secret to winning the jump ball is to jump just a little bit after your opponent does. I'm not sure why it works, but it works. You know, the biggest mystery around Double Dribble is when the game actually came out, and, well, I'm not entirely sure. Bi-Weekly Famitsu ran this 2-page spread on the game in its August 7th, 1987 issue, that's issue number 29. The reviewers were a bit critical of the game, but they still gave it pretty positive ratings, something that was not really common for this magazine. And by early September, the magazine featured all sorts of gameplay hints and tricks, including how to shoot half-court 3-point shots. But the NES version is another story. It was mentioned in this New York Daily News advertisement from April 1987 as coming soon, which I think is the earliest mention of the game anywhere. It received a blurb in this 1987 guide to Nintendo games. Of course, the blurb is really more of an advertisement than anything else and might have just been a promotional ad for a game that hadn't come out yet. However, I haven't been able to find any ads indicating that the game was actually for sale until late October 1987. Now, I know Wikipedia says that it was released in September 1987, but I haven't found any, actual evidence of that. And it's difficult since Nintendo Power wasn't around yet and the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter had basically no information. So yeah, I'm really not sure what the release date actually was. Anyway, the NES version of Double Dribble really is a fun game to play despite its faults. After spending some time with it, I'm starting to believe that it really is the best basketball game on the console. The Famicom Disk System version is also fun, but I prefer the NES version. As for the arcade version, I recommend staying away. Just stick with the NES version. Now, the biggest question is how this game compares with Tecmo NBA Basketball, which was the other big basketball giant on the NES, and that's a subject that we'll cover in my next video. Until then, though, I recommend sticking with Double Dribble.